Anthony Albanese's interview on 7:30 this past week certainly got some ears twitching when he said this.
Mark Latham has views which I find repulsive across a range of areas. He's someone who I regret ever being elected leader of the Labor Party. That's not something I do in retrospect.
Since then, I've already seen an Albo edit or two floating around contrasting his statements on 7:30 with clips from February 2005, where the now PM was delivering a send-off speech for Mark Latham, the former Labor leader. Stuff like this.
Mark Latham is someone who I regret ever being elected leader of the Labor Party. That's not something I do in retrospect.
He was indeed a great political figure. Whether you agreed with him or not, he always made a difference. You noticed that Mark Latham was there. He was articulate, he was clever, he was incisive, he was passionate, and he was humorous.
Authorised by Ahurst Liberal Canberra.
So yeah, that kind of does look bad, but let's take a deeper look. First, here's the full statement on 7:30.
I didn't want Mark Latham to be the leader of the Labor Party and was very clear about that at the time. Mark Latham has views which I find repulsive across a range of areas. He's someone who I regret ever being elected leader of the Labor Party. That's not something I do in retrospect. That's something I fought very hard on when I was one of the people doing the numbers for Kim Beazley in that ballot. And so I think that history has proven that judgment to be correct. Mark Latham since, though, has certainly, under any circumstances, has gone further and further and further away from any values that represent mainstream Australia.
What he was saying there was true as far as I can determine. Albo wasn't a huge Latham fan and had pushed for Kim Beazley instead of Latham back in 2003. What I actually found interesting when scratching around for this little tale was that in the 2003 leadership ballot, Penny Wong reportedly voted for Latham. I mean,
what the fudge were you thinking?
But when it comes to Latham and Albo, if you troll back through history, it wouldn't appear that there's too much love lost between the pair. So then I thought I'd better dig into the archives and locate the full speech from 2005 to see for myself. So here it is in its unedited form.
Oh my God, everyone strap yourselves in!
I rise tonight to pay tribute to the parliamentary career ended by ill health prematurely of Mark Latham as the member for Werriwa. Mark was elected on the 29th of January 1994. It was appropriate he was the member for Werriwa, given that his mentor, the great Gough Whitlam, represented that seat with such distinction, including as Prime Minister between the years of 1972 and 1975. This followed other public service by Mark Latham, in particular his service as a local councillor on Liverpool Council from 1987 to 1994. During that period, he was mayor from 1991. Mark had humble origins. He was proud of being a houser. He never shied away from being the boy from Green Valley. He was a person of ideas. He was a prolific writer. He wrote or helped write 5 books, most notably Civilising Global Capital, New Thinking for Australian Labour. He was a great communicator, though verbally, I think was his greatest asset. He was articulate, he was clever, he was incisive, he was passionate, and he was humorous. He could be tough, he was devastating on his opponents, but he could also be gentle, as he was when he spoke about his mum. And I think that certainly endeared him to myself on the personal level. I didn't always agree with Mark's views. Far from it. We had major disagreements over economic policy and over social policy, both within and outside the forums of the Australian Labor Party. Mark, however, was always prepared to engage in political debate. He was indeed a great political figure. Whether you agreed with him or not, he always made a difference. You noticed that Mark Latham was there, both within the party and outside. One of his last public forums would have been in my electorate of Greenla at Leichhardt Town Hall on Monday the 22nd of November last year. We sent out invitations People thought it was rather odd. I was door knocking just after the election, but some 600 or 700 people filled the hall. We don't know because it was packed. Many people turned away, and he engaged on the whole range of issues, took questions from all comers. I didn't vote for him as leader of the Labor Party. I believed that Kim Beazley was the best prospect to win the Prime Ministership. But post that, as leader, he certainly set the agenda. He had the Howard government on the run over issues such as parliamentary superannuation, on the free trade agreement, where he came up with a clever and principled solution to some of the internal disagreements that we had, of moving amendments to protect the pharmaceutical benefit scheme and to protect our cultural content. And in the end, the government had to cave in to what was a Labor position. On the Iraq War, he led a principled position in opposition to that. I marched with Mark and young Oliver, with myself and my family, at Sydney at the demonstration where more than 250,000 people marched in favour of peace just before that war began. It's unfortunate that Mark's career has been cut short by ill health. I certainly wish him and his wife Janine and his wonderful 2 boys, Oliver and Isaac, all the best. Parliamentary life is very hard. It can be very hard, particularly on people's health. And Mark has made a decision that is in the interests of himself and his family, and I'm sure that all parliamentarians wish him well.
So, what do I reckon? First, sure, Albo has a couple of nice words to say there, but I reckon you need to consider the context. At the time, Albanese would have been the Deputy Manager of Opposition Business in the House. It had been given the task of standing up in Parliament and giving the former Labor leader a send-off speech. A former Labor leader whose decision to quit Parliament was largely reported at the time to be a result of health issues. Now, I don't know about you, but even if Albo thought Latham was a shit bloke at the time, I'd hardly expect him to get up and say so while delivering a political eulogy. Second, I reckon if you're a career politician looking to move up within a political party, there are going to be times where you might have to stand up and say things you don't necessarily believe about people you may not necessarily like.
He's a politician.
It's probably in the job description. Having to publicly say something that you may not necessarily believe in seems to go hand in hand with signing yourself up to a political party, doesn't it? While it would no doubt be refreshing to hear our politicians say what they actually think, depressingly, I kind of just see this as par for the course. And third, I'd actually say that he's pretty upfront there in saying he didn't support Latham's run for leadership.
I didn't vote for him.
In fear of being called a Labor shill here, I reckon on this one you can probably cut the PM some slack. While it's pretty easy to cherry pick some quotes from the 2005 speech to make it sound like he was a Latham fan, to do so you'd be ignoring a fair bit of historical context. And to be honest, it would have been just as easy to cut up a video to look like this.
Here we go. Mark Latham is someone who I regret ever being elected leader of the Labor Party. That's not something I do in retrospect.
I didn't vote for him as leader of the Labor Party. I believed that Kim Beazley was the best prospect to win the Prime Ministership. I didn't always agree with Mark's views. Far from it. We had major disagreements.
Perhaps that video wouldn't stir up quite the same amount of engagement.